Okay, thank you, Fabrice, and thank you, the organizers, for the invitation to participate in the program and in the workshop. So the talk will be mainly some review of known results on the self-similar solutions of geometric flow, but this review is motivated by some recent numerical simulations we have done about the flow, and we have obtained some kind of what I think are nice pictures, and I will put the pictures at the end of the talk. Okay. So the flow is the following. Here x is a vector in R3, and S, as you will see in a minute, is arc length, T is time, and this can be either in the continuous case or the periodic case. So for a fixed T, what I have is the map from S to capital X of ST gives me a curve in R3. So what I am giving is a law of motion of these curves, and I should better start saying what is the geometrical meaning. So in order to do that, I have to define the tangent vector x, tangent vector t, which is the derivative with respect to S of capital X. So then if I differentiate here, then when the derivative falls with respect to S, when the derivative falls here, I get 0. And then the only term that is remaining is this one, which is called the Schrödinger map. In this case, onto the case where I am interested is onto the sphere in R3, because of course if I compute this, which is the same as the derivative of the length square of the tangent vector, this immediately is 0. So if I start assuming that T has unit length, then, and you have a good solution, regular or whatever, then the arc length parametrization will be preserved along the flow. So then T can be visualized as a map from, say, whatever R or the torus into the unit sphere, and then of course, because T is the tangent vector to the unit sphere, and we have this cross product, then this cross product has two implications. One is that you are projecting the second derivative with respect to the tangent plane, and the second one is that you are rotation. You are making a rotation of pi over 2 in this tangent plane. So of course you can rewrite this as right, where ds, capital DS, means the covariance of the derivative, and J is just rotation in the tangent plane to the given point on the sphere. So this is the reason why this is called the Schrödinger map. So this is a first connection with, say, dispersive PDEs at the geometric level. Then now from that equation is if I use, let me put it here, if I use the Frenet frame, which is Ts equals the curvature times the normal. I guess that sometimes people like to call the curvature kappa, but I guess this is for plane curves. One of the papers we wrote, we have to change everything because the referee decided that the curvature has to be called kappa. But anyway, so this is the torsion, and then Bs equals minus the torsion times n, right? So the derivative of the tangent is the curvature times the normal. So then I go to this equation that I guess I call it vortex filament equation, but I prefer to call it the binormal flow. And now the reason is this, that of course this is t cross product the derivative of the derivative of x, which is ts. So this is nothing but the curvature times the binormal. Okay, so the flow is telling me that if I have a point of in the curve, then this point is moving in the direction of the binormal with a velocity or a speed that it is given by the curvature. And as we will see in a minute, there is no ambiguity by assuming that the curvature is 0, because that would mean that the velocity is 0 in that case. So this is, as many people in the audience know, this is a model, an old model that was obtained a long time ago by the Rios as an approximation of the evolution of vortex filaments, where vortex filaments, I guess there is no, if you are in Euler equation, quite likely you have a precise definition, but if you want to see real fluids, this definition is not clear, but because you will have to assume always some kind of viscosity, and then it will never be a filament. It can be, you can start with something which is a filament, but any time afterwards it will never be a filament. But anyway, Didier yesterday showed the video where what is a vortex ring. You remember that you have the cardboard and you have a hole and you use it as a smoke cannon, and then you remember that you have these vortex rings. Of course, what you saw in that experiment is that it is not really a filament, it is a tube. But you can try to visualize, say, the vorticity in a better way by using bubbles instead of smoke. And there are pictures where really, when you look at the bubbles, they look very much as a filament, even for water. Okay? Anyway, so this is, so in a sense, the story goes more or less as follows. You have the velocity, you have the vorticity, which is the curl of the velocity, and you are saying that this vorticity is a vector, but what it is supported is a singular measure which is supported in the filament. Okay, then you want to construct, you want to compute the velocity at the through the Biot-Savart law at the precisely at the filament, and this is a singular integral, and there is no reasonable way of doing it. And at some point, you even has some log of epsilon, where the log of epsilon was precisely the same that Didier had yesterday, and then you kill it. You say a renormalized time, and I obtain a relevant term, the first term of the Taylor expansion, and this is the curvature times the binormal. So the reason I'm saying all this is because it's very, very, very unclear that this model at the end of the day is related to real fluids. Definitely will never be related at the quantitative level. Right? Among other things, this is a local model, while Biot-Savart is a singular integral, so it should never be a local model. And there is the possibility that at the qualitative level, maybe you can learn something about real fluids by studying this particular model. In any case, I think that from the mathematical point of view, the system of PDEs that this geometric flow implies, I think it is interesting, and I hope I will support my my statement with the pictures at the end of the talk. Okay, so why do I think that maybe at the qualitative level maybe you are saying something reasonable? Is because there are some particular solutions, of course, which are straight lines of the binormal flow that are definitely guys that you recognize in real fluids. that should be the tap, the vortex tap or tap vortex, I mean the usual that you see in the bathroom. The other one, of course, are the vortex rings. And there is also the helical or helices that are both solutions in the model and the Euler. At least for an helix, you can have helix configurations that probably they are not really pure helices, but at least the shape is very much that one. All right, so what was, as I said, the motivation was these numerical experiments, and the reason of doing something numerical and not just proving theorems is, of course, at least in my case, I try to do numerics when I am not able to prove theorems. And the reason why I cannot prove theorems here is because recently with De La Hoz, we look at the case where say the starting curve is a regular polygon. Say like a equilateral triangle or a square, and of course if you when we submitted the paper, we received like 2 months later a very furious referee saying that we didn't know what we were talking about, that this has nothing to do with anything, that definitely nothing to do with fluids, because the equation doesn't make any sense with this kind of singularity, right? Well, it is very unclear that you can, or it is not clear at all what is the definition of the curvature times the binormal in a corner, right? So this is one of the difficulties, but from the PDE point of view, this is the relevant thing. I mean, in the sense that if I want to understand singular dynamics, this is the guy, because it has the right scaling. All right, so then it turned out you could ask, can I make any experiment like the one that Didier showed you yesterday? And of course, you can be very naive and say, well, if in order to create a smoke ring, the only thing you have to do is to put a circle, then you can say, well, what happens if I put equilateral triangle, right? Or a square. And of course, this has done for many people. You can go to Google, and you will find many videos of that. And if you do it, I also did it with my daughter, by the way, is, well, you don't see anything at all. I mean, if you have your box here and you shoot, remember that the vortex ring was a very coherent structure that lasted for quite some time. So if you do that with a shape like this, right, you put the smoke inside and you just push, then eventually what you will see is a smoke ring. Okay? But if what we were saying could happen, should have any possibility of happening, it was clear that you were not be able to see it with your eye, right? So then you go to the video, and instead of looking, say, far away, you look close to the hole, and then you see different things are happening. Okay, in particular, something which is called the axis switching phenomenon. Is clearly seen. So, for example, if I start with this structure, then at some point I see something like this. Of course, corners are not corners any longer, because viscosity will kill everything. And in the case of the square, you will see something like this, and this appearing and disappearing. In the sense that, for example, if you go to the video and you just see one frame, in one frame probably is in this position, in the next one is in the opposite. Okay. So then you go to to Google, and you discover that this is called axis switching, and the keywords are non-circular jets. And this is my definition of non-circular jets, for example. Okay, but then you will go to the references, and this was studied with quite big detail in the late 80s and all through the 90s, and it was mainly done for, I guess, experimentalists. Okay, and there is plenty of data from experiments and also from real experiments and numerical experiments. So the other phenomenon is that you have multiples of your symmetry, of the starting symmetry appears. So in any case, the dynamic seems to be much more complex than the one of the circle up here. So that means that, for example, if I start with a triangle like this, at some point I will see an hexagon, and of course corners are no corners, so you cannot go much farther, because the next thing should be something with 9 sides, and then 9 sides with corners which are not corners, then it's very hard to see. But for example, so there are probably, this is a Wundt reference, 95, 96, then you will find a picture like this. Okay, starting with a square. And they really see, like you start with a 4 symmetry, they claim they see, say, coherent structures, whatever this means, with 8 sides. All right. And well, if you use this model and you run the numerics, and in fact, if you do some analysis, you explain these two things by the Talbot effect, which is a phenomenon well known in optics. So it's a wave phenomenon. And in fact, we claim this is a really nonlinear Talbot effect, meaning that it is not something that you can obtain by looking at the Talbot effect of linear optics, and then from that one to deduce something for this equation. Anyway, so we kept doing some numerics, and then we discovered that at time, so if this is at time 0, then we discovered at time 0 plus, if I look at the evolution of this corner, of this one, you don't see the influence of the other ones. So the dynamics close to the corner and for infinitesimal times is dictated by the case where you only have one corner. All right? Then what is the case where you only have one corner? Well, this is something that lives. So I would like to obtain something of this type to look at a configuration like this ones, where A plus and A minus are 2 unit vectors. So you are dealing with something like this. This is A minus and this is A plus. And of course, this is something that lives in the full space, in the real line, and it has a very precise scaling invariance. So immediately, what I am saying is that what the numerics suggest, and you can quantify it in a very precise way, because there is a very clear geometric thing that it is happening in the evolution of one corner. Some angle appears, and you measure the angle, and the angle is the same. That's what we are meaning. So what I say is that at time 0, this corner is like if I just look at this. So you can really see the regular polygon as that you don't have just one filament, that you have infinitely many, one for each corner. But of course, where here you have to understand the closed curve as a periodic one. So you have infinitely many corners. So, all right. So then we decided to look more carefully about what we could say about cell-similar solutions, and in particular I will review something which is, say, kind of old, will appear at the end of 2015, which is, one is the continuation. So this is one of the things I want to address. Continuation after the singularity has been developed. And here the singularity means corner. Huh? This is my first question. The second question is about conservation laws. And as Monica said this morning, there was this program in Berkeley last fall where weak turbulence is in, at least it's on fashion, and it is very, at least not clear to me at all what is the meaning of weak turbulence, but for example, talking to different people more from the stochastic point of view, you always try to look for some conservation law that it is not preserved, because you don't have good boundary conditions. Okay. In this case, the one I guess is sometimes is called the impulse or the linear momentum, and this is one of the conservation laws that this model keeps coming from, say, Euler and Navier-Stokes. In fact, it's the one very much related to the vortex rig. Is the momentum that the vortex transports, so that if you can use your smoke cannon to turn the candle off. You see? That's the kind of thing. And the third issue is, can I say something about, well, let me put it in a function, about transfer of energy. This is, of course, a very strong words. Let me just probably to prove something like there is lack of continuity of some norm. Okay, so these are the three issues I want to look at. So let me start from the last one, because it is not clear at all what is the good function space for the kind of singular situation I want to study. All right. So maybe I should keep this one. So let's start from the beginning by saying that to use definite frame is probably not a very good idea, because you are using polar coordinates and then you are creating some singularity where it is not. So it's much better to use the so-called the parallel frame, and then so you have a system of orthonormal vectors, capital T, of course, which is the tangent, and then E1 and E2, which are bases in the normal plane. So that now the, say, Frenet equations become these other equations. And now, say, the scalars, which are unit 2, that keep the geometric information, are given by a complex number, which is alpha plus E beta. Alpha and beta are real, E1 and E2 and capital T are real vectors. And then I guess it's very well known that this equation has some kind of complex Hofkohl transformation, which in this setting is called the Hashimoto transformation, which says that if xi is chosen in this way and capital T evolves according to the Schrödinger map, then you obtain the equation for the, you obtain the 1D cubic NLS, and it is focusing because my target is the sphere, and that's the one I'm interested in. So this is 1/2 of psi squared minus A of t xi, where A of t is real, and it is due to the gauge invariance of the problem, right? I always have the freedom to use the coordinates at a given point for any t. All right, so then this is, of course, is a completely integrable system that it have infinitely many conservation laws. And the starting one is L2, at least from the positive one. So if I start with something in L2, this is preserved. But unfortunately, if I want to consider this kind of situation, the curvature in this case is the delta function. So what I am interested in is in something like C naught times the delta, which of course is not in L2. So then you start the question, at least the natural question of can you go below L2 naturally appears, and this is something, so you want, say, well-postness, say, for any space below L2. And this is something I think that the first result in this direction was the one I proved with Ana Vargas some time ago. And it is the function space is much better understood in terms of the Fourier transform of the initial condition. And you really want it to be a translation invariant because you want the Galilean invariance to be preserved. So you want a Fourier space, something defined in Fourier space, which is translation invariant. You could also, but then you miss. You can do something, but then you remain quite far. I guess that if I'm not wrong, we got like 1/4 at least, not bigger than 1/4 gain. So you can keep working in this, say, so by assuming things like this belongs to some probably weighted spaces, and then Grunrock extended all the way up to, say, with some weights, p smaller than plus infinity, and the real good one, and this is my first Fourier space, would be that I would like to consider data such that the Fourier transform is in L infinity. This is for the, say, the curvature and the torsion, and if you ask yourself in geometric terms what is the analogous of this, would be to say that the derivative of the tangent, which means curvature times the normal, to be, so remember this is the same as curvature times the normal, or if you prefer, if you use the other notation, will be this guy in L infinity, where n is n1 plus n e2. So this is for me today the natural space. Okay, I'm not going to enter if you think this is reasonable or not, but this is it. Okay. So, well, so this is about function spaces. So the next thing I have to recall was about self-similar solutions. So let's do some elemental ODE exercises and try to understand the self-similar solutions. And of course, I could try to do it here, but it is not, you can do it, but it's much better to work directly in the binormal flow. And then the right ansatz is something like this. And you are looking for the capital G, and T here is positive. Look at this equation as Euler. It has more than one possible scaling, but if you really want to preserve the arc length that in fact you want, this is the only possible one. And of course, it's the one that also comes when you start saying Navier-Stokes and you pass to the limit in the viscosity. So now I want to find a solution of that binormal flow problem under these settings. So you do the usual things, and you end up with this ODE. And if you differentiate again, you will obtain, and I keep calling capital T the corresponding derivative, then immediately you obtain minus s over 2 t prime equals t cross product t second prime, and then you use, in this case, Frenet frame, and you immediately see that then the curvature has to be a constant and the torsion has to be s over 2. Okay, so this is very easy. And then you have a nice real analytic curve in 3D, and of course the starting question is you expect that the limit when t go to 0 plus of this guy is this guy. This is the question. That means that you really have to understand, say for S, good. For S strictly positive, you have to understand the asymptotics of G at infinity. And for example, if the asymptotics of this curve at infinity is given by a straight line, this is very easy, because if you just do this derivative, this gives me G prime S minus G over S square. But remember that this is the curvature times the binormal. The curvature is constant. So precisely this is minus 2 times the curvature times V divided by S square. And if you are in the elliptic case, meaning the sphere, then the binormal has Euclidean distance 1. If you are in the hyperbolic plane, you have to work a little bit more, but not that much. So that means that the derivative is integrable, so that of course U of S over S has a limit when S goes to plus minus infinity. Although of course you don't know if these two vectors are the same or not. So in order to have a corner, you need to prove that these two vectors are not the same. Okay, so in fact you can do much more. And this is something I did a long time ago with Gutierrez and Rivas. Is that in fact I always get confused about the angles, but so this is a minus, this is a plus, and I think it is this the angle I have to consider. You can even obtain a very close formula. You say that cosine of theta over 2 is e to the minus pi c squared over 2. So in fact this gives you uniqueness, existence for all angles except when the two vectors are one the opposite of the other one, and also gives you uniqueness. In fact, you can work a little bit more and with tricks similar to that one, and you can say that T of S is precisely A plus minus plus 2 times C naught over S times the binormal plus O of 1 over S for say S bigger than 1, and that the binormal is e to the I S squared over 4 plus some logarithmic correction that is, of course, is completely reminiscent that in here you are dealing with some kind of a scattering. This is a scattering problem because I give you the information at 0 and I ask something about what happens at infinity. So this log correction is because we all know that the scattering for this equation is long range. So for some b plus minus, some O of 1 over S, where this b plus minus is tangent to the a plus minus, and of course this is some real part plus I imaginary part, and they are orthogonal of unitary length. Okay, so the picture is more or less as follows. It's very easy to more or less see how is the picture of capital G, because you know that close to 0 the torsion is 0, so it has to be close to, say, a horseshoe. And then at infinity it has to be 2 lines. In between you have you can kind of freeze and frozen the S, and then it will be an helix with a pitch that will be changing with S. So essentially, this is what E of t. So this will be the A plus, and this will be the A minus. And then, of course, what the information at the origin is given by the curvature, and this is the information at infinity. All right, so this is it. So this is well known. Now, let me try to understand now these three questions about this guy. And the first one, yes?
So you have uniqueness here?
Yes.
So you can prove it?
Yes, because of this formula. And why this formula is true is, well, I guess it depends. As you probably know, to be able to give a closed formula for this kind of problems is extremely unusual. So you need to have plenty of symmetry to have such a thing. And of course, this is not any self-similar solution. You can have more other self-similar solutions, for example, the ones that comes from the principal value of 1 over s, that are logarithmic spirals. And those ones, I cannot give you a formula like this. The reason is that this one is Galilean invariant. It is the only one. So I have many more symmetries. Anyway, so concerning the first question, this is a theorem. There was several works with Valeria Vanica, but at the end of the day, we were able to prove. Okay. So before I do this, in order to conserve to answer the first question, I have to really give you to try to extend the solution for, say, negative time, right? And I will do it as everybody has done it here in the previous talks related to this, right? I just plug the corresponding conservation law that goes for negative time. So you have always this symmetry that all these are oriented curves. So if I change the orientation, I change time. So in order to change orientation, the only thing I have to do is to change this guy into this guy and vice versa with a proper sign. So I could construct in, say, this kind of an artificial way the following guy, which is my starting solution, which is a square root of t g s over a square root of t, say for t positive, and then a square root of absolute value of t, some rotation of g of s over a square root of absolute value of t for t negative. And the only thing I need is to change the orientation. So I need a rotation that I think has to do this, or something close to this. And because the problem lives in invariant rotations, then I will have a solution for t positive, a solution for t negative, and that they have the same initial conditions. So I could wonder if this is a solution or not. Okay. So then the theorem with Valeria is that that x tilde is a stable solution in an appropriate sense. And that means that if I make small perturbations, I remain close to the curve, and in particular the corner is the same. And here small, the perturbations are done at the level of the curvature and the torsion. They are small in some space that is related to that kind of setting. That means that that means that I can, if you want, creation and annihilation of corners is stable. And this is very important for the case of the regular polygon, because corners appear and disappear in a precise way. All right, so two words about this, and this is, as I said, the last paper appeared at the end of last year. The first thing is that if I do it at the level of NLS, then it is no way. And this is because if I make, say, I start at, so let me see, what is the, I should have said this, under this situation, the corresponding psi, of course, is the one you expect. Okay, so imagine that at time 1 I start with a small perturbation of C naught. Then we are able to construct a solution all the way to 0 plus, but when it goes to 0 plus, what I obtain, so if you want the asymptotics, is like the C, so it's 1 over square root of t e to the ix square over 4s, s square over t, plus, then you have the problem of the long range appearing, epsilon plus literal of 1. So it doesn't matter what you do, this problem is imposed. In the sense, and this is quite generic. I mean, for let's say almost all the, it doesn't matter how small it is. I make a perturbation, I construct the solution, I go to the delta function in here, but this one does not have a limit because of this guy. Of course, this from the geometric point of view has no real implication because you always have the freedom of the gauge. So you really want to know if this is a real problem or not. And it turns out that this theorem is telling you that there is kind of a unique, the meaning of what of that has to be precise, to precisely written. There is kind of a unique way of continuing the problem when you go back to the geometric setting. All right? And the second was that in order to do this information, so what you are able to prove is that your solution goes to some guy T naught of S, and at the limit you recover the important information, which are the A plus minus B plus minus that comes from the self-similar solution, and this is the one that allows you to construct the frame at time 0 and to continue. And because you have a characterization of the self-similar solution, then you can do it. So this is what I wanted to remember. And if this fits pretty well, for example, you will see in a minute with the kind of pictures that Manuel Del Pino was showing yesterday for the heat reading the map. You will see in a minute why. So this is about the first question. The second question, I will use this blackboard, is that in fact it's very easy to see that the linear impulse is not preserved. Because the linear impulse is just, in this setting, is nothing but this. But this is g of the square root of t, g of s over the square root of t, cross t of s over the square root of t, and you're integrating in s. So this gives me t, gs cross t, but remember that g satisfies that equation, so the only thing I have to do is g prime is t, so the only thing that remains is the normal, so this is nothing but the normal cross product with the tangent, so this is t curvature times the normal, which is the derivative of the tangent, and then what you are saying is that the tangent at plus minus infinity has this value, so this is precisely t a plus minus a minus for t positive, and for t negative will be the same but with absolute value. So the linear impulse, so this is for all. So the linear impulse is not preserved, and it's of course because the energy or whatever is going to plus minus infinity. All right? And the third, answering the third question, it turns out that there is some small surprise, at least for me, which is as follows. If I compute the L infinity norm of Ts, which is the same as the curvature times the normal, this is 4 times 1 minus e to the minus pi c naught square. This is for t equals 0, and for t different from 0 is 4 times pi c naught square. And it turns out that this number is strictly bigger than this one as soon as c naught is not 0. Okay, so there is a lack of continuity in this particular node, which if I had to make the picture of what's going on, is exactly the same picture that you made yesterday. You have a jump at 0 and then you recover. All right. Of course, you are able to do this because you have this nice formula, and this is not so straightforward because, for example, if I go to these asymptotics, I have to pay attention to the next term because I'm computing the Fourier transform. So this was some elemental facts. So now it's a very natural question. What can I say when I start with a regular polygon? Right? And these are the pictures. So I need to. So what do I do to turn this? So where is the linear momentum? Remember, is here. Yes. So what I'm going to show you is what can I say, for example, with the linear momentum in the case of a regular polygon where you have many more symmetries. And well, if you start to think a little bit about what I have just written, okay, that this, then you don't see this problem in the periodic case, of course. Okay, so the linear momentum has 3 components. This would be the third one. In this case, I think it's a equilateral triangle. I don't know what happens. And this would be the third component. So the third component will be this one, and you see that essentially is conserved. You see that all the numbers on the left are the same. All right? And then if you do the other two, by symmetry, they are going to be 0. Okay? Right? Just by symmetry of the problem. So what is kind of you want to see if there is, at least when you look at the density of the conservation law, if there is some transfer from one place to another one. And then you do instead of integrating in a closed curve, you integrate in half of it. And I show you the first and the second component. This is what you see, which is the classical picture of, say, for example, the Riemann non-differentiable function, something, say, some intermittency or whatever, and some fractality. This is one of the components, and the other one is this one. Okay? So this is what you see. And now let's see, the other question is what can I say about the maximum of the Fourier coefficients of the tangent, right? And it is, there is another symmetry in this case, and it makes, in fact, if T3, where this, so I'm going to compute this, in fact, this, and these other ones. And I'm going to take the maximum. And in fact, by a very simple symmetry, when one is not 0, the other one is 0, and so on and so forth. Anyway, and this is the picture. So this is for the T1 plus I2, IT2. So this is the maximum. So I guess you see, I was not expecting this, to be honest, because these times are, I'm sorry, you are not missing these are time, this is time, and this is the maximum. And of course, these peaks are the rationals. The smaller the denominator, the bigger the peak. And of course, well, this, I guess, if there is a good definition of intermittency, I guess this is one, right? And of course, that means that you have transfer, definitely. I don't know how to prove this, and this is for the other one. Okay, this is for the T3. And you could wonder about what happens here, right? And if you do a plug of a log, then it fits. But poof, you have to do plenty of more experiments to see if there is really a log there or not. That we don't have any idea at all. So as a conclusion, I do think that in the right function space, the dynamics of this completely integrable system is much richer than what I would have expected at the beginning. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions?
But this is an effect of the periodic boundary conditions.
Of course, this is the Talbot effect.
So, but if you increase the length of the, do you still observe these peaks, or do you have some dispersion coming?
Well, if you remain, as long as you have periodic boundary conditions, it's going to happen. Of course, the peaks will become smaller and smaller, but I bet, yeah, it's a question of scale.
But the stability, that the result that you presented uses the dispersion a lot, right?
Yeah, but you do it. I mean, you see, the numerics of this is kind of delicate because you really have to capture the dynamics that happens at rational times, right? And then you could wonder, how are you going to be rational times in the computer? Well, here they are, right? These are the rational times, of course. But and then, well, we had for quite some time De La Hoz of this is done with De La Hoz. Huh? We have plenty of numerical simulations, but we were using the Schrödinger, the stereographic projection. Thinking from an analytical point of view, the stereographic projection is better, right? Because then you don't have the nonlinearity at the biggest order. But it turns out that for the numerics it's extremely worse. In fact, we use, in here you are using very strongly that you don't, I mean, you have not just this equation, but also the other one. So in the numerics, you use, first of all, you can use a spectral method. So from that point of view, the numerics, well, what you are saying, I would say, is very, very stable. It doesn't matter how long the period is. And it works pretty well. I mean, I don't understand why it works so well, but you really, well, you have seen the pictures. I mean, you go to the rational times and you see your polygon of MQ sites. It is there. So I would say so, yeah. Because, of course, the numerical scheme is, as I said, is spectral, which is the reasonable thing to do here, of course. Yeah.
Other questions? Comments? Well, if not, let's thank Luis again.